All right. Well, it's a couple minutes after 2. I think we'll go ahead and get the meeting started. I appreciate it. For those of you who may not know me or know my face, my name is Scott. I'm president of the Greater St. Charles County Chamber. I want to welcome you guys to our live Zoom with Mike Hurlbert. Mike's been very involved and engaged. He's kind of I guess, the go-between the county executive, the health department, and the business community. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike. I believe Molly is going to put up some slides on the screen, but we'll go ahead and turn it over to Mike and let you share a little bit about what's going on and what we need to be doing to maybe help prepare St. Charles County businesses to open on Monday.
Great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate your time, everybody being involved here. I'm Mike Hurlbert. I'm Director of Community Development for St. Charles County. As part of the incident command that's going on with COVID-19, I've also been tasked as what is called the ESF 14, which is the Essential Emergency Services Function 14, which is actually termed long-term recovery. So my job as part of that role is to work with the business community and be a liaison between the county with the health department, the county exec's office, and our business community to help with whatever we can do to enable recovery, successful recovery, whatever that's defined by in St. Charles County. So kind of first what I was looking at doing was making sure that the all available resources that were being put out by federal and state programs through like the CARES Act and all the other legislative acts of what monies were available, and making sure that that was being put out there in information and access. Based on, I don't have the actual numbers in terms of what that full access was in St. Charles County, but I do know that the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, was utilized pretty fully here in St. Charles County by a number of businesses, so that's great. Hopefully everybody was able to get through some of the myriad of issues that are always going to be somehow exist with a federal program like that. But hopefully there's going to be some other programs, other money programs that are available, and we'll continue to push that information out as we can. What I'd like to do now is kind of go through a presentation here. Molly's got it available. I don't know if she's able to share that, Scott.
Right now.
Yep. Here we go. Go to the full screen. So I termed this one calling reopening of St. Charles County. What we're looking at doing is going through kind of some history here real fast.
Do you just do
Yep.
from beginning?
Yep. So, go ahead, next slide. So part of the county's orders going back in time here, back in March 16th, the county executive issued the first of several orders, which seems like forever ago now, but March 16th prohibited the gatherings of 50 or more people. So that was the beginning of the social distancing policies that would be put in place. The next day, on March 17th, order prohibited the on-premise consumption of food or drink, basically making those restaurants and places like that have to go with the to-go order, curbside, and drive-through kind of options. Then on March 19th, the social distancing went from 50 all the way down to 10 people being limited. And again, that was kind of in concert with what was going on across the country and enhancing the social distancing techniques that were already in place. Then on March 23rd, the county ordered issued what we call the stay-at-home order which was to prohibit, well, yeah, it prohibited, it recommended, if you will, that the residents stay at home or within their surrounding property, but they could go to employment or any activities they deem essential. And that was important for the county executive. He did not want himself or the government to be determining what was essential. He wanted the residents to make that decision on themselves. So it was a little different than, say, like St. Louis City or St. Louis County, which was, they actually did have a list of essential businesses. And then just this week, the latest order from the county exec was to basically extend the state of emergency through the governor's order, well, the state order, the Show Me Strong Recovery Plan. And that allowed the adoption of that plan to be St. Charles County's plan for reopening. That begins on May 4th. So looking then a little bit larger at the what the state of Missouri's orders, on April 6th is when they ordered the non-essential businesses to close and place limitations on what customers could do and where they could go, and impose that 10-person limit. And then April 16th, that order was extended through May 4th. And then just recently, the April 27th was the order for the Show Me Strong Recovery Plan, Phase 1. And again, that was what County Executive Ellman then adopted to cover St. Charles County's plan for reopening. So real quick, wanted to kind of show you some information here. This is cumulative cases of in St. Charles County in relation to some of our adjoining counties. We are the orange line there in the middle. So as of April 26, we had 13.9 cases per 10,000 population. You see that St. Louis County in the blue was at 29.1, and St. Louis City was at 32.6. So we were less than half of those, basically. And then Jefferson County and Franklin County were just slightly lower than us. And that kind of shows the trajectory and as well as the number of cases there. And then this graph here shows, it's kind of interesting because on 3/24, that orange line there is when the county's stay-at-home order was issued. As everybody, I think, knows, the incubation period for COVID is approximately 14 days. Interestingly enough, on 4/7, so on 4/6 is when the peak number of cases, which was about between 47, 48, something like that, we had cases in one day confirmed. We have since then kind of steadily, for the most part, gone down in cases per day. So on 4/7, that was 14 days after the county's stay-at-home order was issued. So that correlates with kind of potential that stay-at-home order seemed to work or have at least some effectiveness. And so as the cases have steadily gone down for the most part, that's why the county executive felt it was reasonable and to adopt the state order for reopening as such. And then this is the Google Mobility Report. I don't know everybody's familiar with it. It's something that I've been looking at on a weekly basis. It basically shows the amount of cell phone usage by location. And so what was interesting to note here was what our comparison was with between St. Charles County and St. Louis County. A lot of the information that was happening was starting in February 29th is when this was being looked at. The rate of where the cell phone usage is occurring, such as retail or recreation, had gone down by 50% since that time. Workplace was down 39% in St. Charles County. I had compared that with the information that was in the previous week's report, such as, and by the way, this is April 11th. I don't know why the Missouri data has not been updated since then. So this is a little dated, but it at least gave us a little bit of an indicator of what's going on potentially in those locations. So interestingly enough, St. Louis County was down 49% in retail and 29%. So St. Charles County was actually doing, according to this information, was doing social distancing or stay at home, in my mind, a little better than St. Louis County, which had a more strict order. So I found that very interesting. The county executive definitely found that interesting as well. And then some of those charts down there kind of show it's ebbed and flowed a little bit as time has moved on. But that was something that I found of interest. One thing that's not on this chart here, another category was groceries and pharmacy. And St. Charles County, as of April 11, for grocery and pharmacy was actually up 16%. So that was something of interest as well. It certainly doesn't offset the sales tax loss that's occurring within the retail sector, but there was a little bit of a difference, a positive difference at least, in grocery and pharmacy stores. So real quick, kind of want to go through a summary of the Show Me Strong Recovery Plan, Phase 1. The important thing to note here is that for all residents, social distancing is still in effect. Residents must stay 6 feet apart when together and not related by family or performing job duties that can't require that separation. If you can't require that separation for your job duties, you have to use some sort of enhanced precautionary measures, is how the order states it. Now, I will state the order doesn't actually define clearly what those enhanced precautionary measures are. So we'll go into that in a couple slides here, what the St. Charles County is doing to provide guidance on that information. Social distancing still applies to barber, cosmetology, hair salons, tattoo parlors, those types of things. But again, with enhanced precautionary measures in place, that will make those businesses still be able to operate in some form or fashion. Gyms, hotel, swimming pools, they also must adhere to strict sanitation protocols that the state calls out. In addition, we have the restaurants have some specific requirements. They have to have a spacing of 6 feet between tables, and they cannot have communal seating areas for parties, such as large benching areas and things like that. They are encouraged to continue the use of drive-through pickup delivery, obviously. Places of worship, which there's always seems to be some questions about. Social distancing, so you have the 6 foot separation, but they can hold in-person services. They just have to do that with the social distancing way of performing that. They obviously are still encouraged to use streaming and online kind of options if they have that, or drive-through or whatever you want to call that. So, and then locations such as movie theaters, weddings, school graduations, they also obviously have to adhere to social distancing. So that impacts banquets and receptions and those types of things of how they can be performed, but with those parameters in place. And then fraternal organizations and youth sports camps still have to do that social distancing. They're encouraged to make changes to the programs based on the current environment. So you're seeing some that are looking at potential resumption of activities, but changing their schedules or how they would do it with people massing and crowds and things like that. It's still a lot of unanswered questions on how they will do that. So that's still yet to be determined. Public health authorities still remain the same in terms of their role. And then guidance for retail, grocery, childcare, that's still being carried over from the previous order that was called out. Business and employers should be encouraged to continue teleworking where they can. And I think that's a lot of, some of the new norm that's happening out there is how permanent does some of that occur or continue to occur. We'll have to see and watch that happen, how that does. So as I mentioned, the enhanced precautionary measures that the state order calls for but does not specify. I've worked with Demetrius Fiancee Champion at the Department of Health, the county, as well as the executive's office and communication department to put out some additional guidance for businesses, for employers. So it's available now on the county website at COVID-19. And there's a link for this guidance here. This is a look at the chart. I'm not going to go through every single step because it's a lot of information, but I do want to point out to you that we separated it out by specific business types. And so there's some additional guidance for each of these categories that can kind of give some information on recommendations and basically what our best practices that we're seeing, that the health department is seeing occur in other jurisdictions and other industries. So I hope this information will be helpful for everybody. Obviously, it doesn't answer every single question, but please, as a business owner, utilize this information and let us know if you have any questions on it. Churches and schools and other uses are also in there as well. So there's probably some other categories and other information, but it's, like I said, hopefully it has a lot of the data that people are seeking as they create plans for reopening of their operations. So that's my contact information there. You can contact me, phone number, email, whatever you need to. I'm happy to try to work with any business or any resident that has questions. It's really interesting, the impact of what's going on. I told a number of people that I've been in community development, some fashion, for over 25 years, and this is all new to us. I mean, literally, we're reading the book as we write it. Is the way I term it. It's all new. Nobody has a template. We're trying to respond and try to get information out for everybody as quickly as we can. But we want to make sure it's good information, it's the right information, and hopefully we're doing that. But obviously we appreciate any feedback as you encounter your issues or concerns.
Great.
Go ahead, Scott.
Go ahead. I heard somebody. Was that you, John?
Oh, Vaney at Bowie. Good to see a lot of people's faces. I had a quick question. If anybody is doing anything for pre-screening before they walk in your building, we're at a larger capacity of people now with this new mandate. And just curious if anybody was doing anything different or doing temperature checks, because we can't really have everyone fill out a form anymore now. Our staff is going to be required to wear masks. The issue we're dealing with is we've literally this week alone had 2 families lie to us that their loved one died of COVID and said that they didn't. And we went to the hospital and the hospital said, no, they died of COVID. And the family came in for arrangements and had been exposed to that person. So we're finding families are literally lying to us and not adhering to rules. And now we have to deal with a larger amount of people in our funeral homes. And the churches are a whole nother issue. but I'm just open to any suggestions that anybody has, because we're trying to think through this as best as we can.
I can tell the that is one of the recommendations, is that all employers implement some form of workplace health screening.
Okay.
We do, at St. Charles County government, we have a form that we utilize. It's one page. It's fairly simple. But you're right. And by the way, there's a link to that as part of the website guidance, so people can look at that.
Okay.
But you're right. There's some trust involved in that they're answering the questions truthfully. The one thing I would say is, if you can have access to a thermometer that's a good quality one, not just simple ones for the house, is probably, while that can work, it would be better to have ones that are a little bit
not one that they put under their armpit.
Right. And John,
right,
I do have a link to, I was going to say, I have a link to a thermometer, because I know you have to be very, very careful, because it has to be pretty accurate, because you don't want one that's in a range of 3 to 4 degrees, because that's a problem. So I do have a link to one, and I could send you the information to a thermometer if that's the route you chose. Okay.
That'd be great, because we're having a hard time finding them. So that'd be excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and this company, they saw this happening, and I think that they know that they've ramped up production. They said that their thermometers won't be available till probably mid-May, but it's probably sooner than most companies that you're going to find out there. So, but yeah, we're hearing the same thing, that they're going to be hard to come by, but there's a lot of companies that are doing the temperature checks on the forehead.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions that were submitted to me, Mike, and maybe you addressed them. Sorry, I wasn't fully listening. I had to do some things off to the side. But anyway, there's a question regarding liability and risk to exposure for employees and customers as businesses start to reopen. Do you have any ideas or thoughts on the liability that could be presented to businesses?
Well, I'm no lawyer, and I don't try to play one on TV, but the thing I can say is that this situation is no different than in anything other liability that they would be subject to. So if somebody is got a contagious disease and they're walking into a retail establishment or a restaurant or what have you, that same liability would be similar in my mind. Probably want to talk to somebody that's more of an expert on that, but that would be my very high level answer to that question.
Okay.
And if I can chime in, Scott.
Yes.
Catherine Flatt, lawyer here. Hi. This has been a big discussion in our field. There's going to be a ton of lawsuits over this. The biggest thing that I see an issue with is causation. You would have to prove that you got the disease wherever you're claiming that you got it from. And that's going to be really tough to prove. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. But as defense lawyers, we're not too afraid of what's going on here, because causation is going to be really difficult to prove.
Would it be helpful, Catherine, if businesses put signs up at their door stating if anybody has any symptoms, they shouldn't enter the facility?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, any kind of guideline or rules preventing people from coming in with COVID, you can't make a claim. I mean, you can always make a claim, but it will, affect the success of that claim if you violated that rule. But again, how can you prove that you got it at this business as opposed to a grocery store that you went to earlier in the day, or your church, or wherever else? It's going to be one of those things that's very difficult to prove.
Very true. All right. Well, I appreciate the insight on that. I think everybody else on here does too. Thank you, Catherine.
Sure.
Next question that I had dealt with the event space. I know, I believe the governor listed or lifted the guideline with regards to group sizes, as long as they can maintain their social distancing. Is that true? Because I think before they had a cap of no more than 10, and with the social distancing. So I assume that's all been lifted at the county as well.
That is correct. Yeah. So the state guidelines are the county's guidelines, and so they as long as they can meet the 6-foot separation for social distancing, then they would be able to amass people accordingly. I had this question from a restaurant user that because retail actually has a specific occupancy limitation as part of the state guidelines. So a retail establishment that is less than 10,000 square feet in size is limited by 20 to 25% of its normal occupancy. Whereas a retail establishment that is over 10,000 square feet must abide to a 10% of its occupancy. So retail can only allow so many people within it based on their size. Restaurants technically are under retail, but they're their own category. And so restaurants do not have that occupancy rule. They just have that 6-foot separation between tables. They do limit the number of parties at a table, single table, to no more than 10 people. But based on the restaurant's ability to move tables and chairs around and fit within that 6-foot separation, they would be able to fit people in there according to whatever their fit that can happen.
Okay, perfect. Next question I had, somebody was asking about enforcement of the rules. I know this question came up to the governor as well. How are we going to enforce these guidelines and rules within businesses? And I know the governor said, well, the business owners should be enforcing them as well as customers. So does the county have anything different than that? Do they have a committee or a group of people that will be going out and making sure businesses comply to the guidelines?
You know, not really beyond our normal enforcement capacity. The health department already can do routine inspections of restaurants and health facilities and pet facilities and medical facilities, things like that. So they would still have the ability to do that kind of inspections as they need to, but it's basically going to be complaint driven. If people have concerns about it, they can contact the health department through the COVID contact and voice a concern, and our health department will investigate. It doesn't mean that that's a violation is present, but obviously they will investigate those concerns as they come in, and then enforcement is through the health department and their ability to do that.
Right. The last question. Go ahead, Mike.
There is no group running around trying to find violations. That's not. I know the county executive was quick to point out to people that we didn't close any businesses. Obviously, the criteria caused some businesses to have to limit their operations, but there was no formal requirement to close a business, and that's still not the case with any of the guidelines currently in place.
Okay. And then the last question I had submitted to me, if an individual is not comfortable in returning to work right away, are they at risk of losing their unemployment? And I don't know if you have the answer to that or not, but throw that out there to you.
So yeah, so I'm not the unemployment guy, but I can tell you I was on a state call with our department, the unemployment office there through the state office, and that question was kind of asked. Similar question was asked, and the director said that gave the answer that no, if your employer calls you back to work, then you would need to report to work unless you're sick or have reasons you can't do that. But that would not make you eligible for unemployment. Just not choosing not to go back to work out of the fear or anything like that.
Right. Okay. Very good. Does anybody else have any questions? You can either unmute yourself or you could throw the question into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer. We'll take a couple questions if anybody has any.
Check your email or text. Wendy sent you one.
I was
all right.
Ask you about places of worship. We have multiple spaces within our building that are larger. We have obviously our worship space, but there are other larger rooms. So is a location restricted by number, or does it depend on the capacity of those, multiple spaces that we can, have people in areas? What are some of the restrictions or things we need to be concerned with regard to that?
Well, again, it's going to fall down to the social distancing criteria. So whether it's a smaller space within or the larger, your larger gathering space, as long as you can maintain a 6-foot separation, then that will limit you to the number of people that could fit within that space. If you're doing other measures like pre-screening and washing, sanitation and things like that, that's all going to be important and helpful to it as well. But again, it just comes down to that social separation of 6 foot.
So the location, it isn't limited necessarily by a number. It's the capacity of the interior of the building.
Correct.
Okay.
Within the 6 foot separation parameters.
Right.
I have another question that was submitted, I think, through Facebook. Obviously, banks dealing with people wearing masks. Have you heard any guidance from any bankers or anybody? How do banks deal with employees that have to wear a mask, or maybe customers that are coming in wearing masks? This came from a banker. I didn't know if you'd heard anything from anyone or not.
I have not. I can say that, while the CDC guidelines would say recommend a mask, wearing a mask in outdoor and within certain areas, the county guidelines and the state criteria therefore doesn't speak to it, but the county guidelines speak to wearing a mask as one of the options. So if a bank were to set up their own policy that we ask that you remove your mask once you enter the premise, and they're doing a bunch of other measures to try to offset that, then that would fit still within the guidelines as they're stated.
Someone in the chat asked about medical. Is the health department directing when elective procedures can resume? I believe that they could resume on May the 4th, correct?
Correct. That's under the state guidelines that they can resume. Again, it's going to be the health operation, the centers, wherever that's going to be performed. If they're doing other measures to make sure that they're keeping the safety of the employees and the patients in mind. Really, it's going to be, my mind, whether people want to go back to start doing those. Do they feel safe? Do they feel comfortable doing that? I think that demand will drive how much of that actually does open up as early as Monday.
All right. Is there any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, this is Austin with Mesh Fitness. Mike, you had commented a little bit about businesses that ordinarily would require close physical contact. My fitness and self-defense gym, ordinarily we're in very close contact doing like jujitsu and self-defense, different scenarios where we're, touching each other. How does the social distancing apply to a business like mine? Is there shed any light on whether my business is required to have folks be 6 foot or more apart, or are we able to, obviously being as safe as possible, maintain some close contact?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of read the direct quote that it would pertain to you and similar businesses. It states that if individuals performing job duties that require contact with other people closer than 6 feet should take enhanced precautionary measures to mitigate the risk of contracting or spreading COVID-19. This provision shall apply in all situations including but not limited to when customers are standing in line or individuals are using shared indoor or outdoor spaces. So as I mentioned, that enhanced precautionary measures isn't defined further in the state criteria. So that's why we put that information out on the county website. There's a section that says additional guidance, recommended actions for all businesses. And I think that kind of criteria would definitely apply to in your case. It talks about health screenings, employees monitoring themselves, or guests monitoring themselves, making sure they don't come in if they have any symptoms, washing hands frequently or using hand sanitizer, wearing cloth face covering if you can, and post reminders or signage about face coverings, hygiene, social distancing, that type of thing whenever you can within your facility.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. I got a couple more questions here. Is there any concern from the county that we might see a spike after May the 4th?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the health director was instrumental in putting this information, helping put this information together, because they're concerned about this going back up. And it as you saw in that one chart, that one graph, it kind of has ebbed and flowed. It has gone down for the most part, but there are days where it might be bigger than the previous day. And so there's concern, there's a lot of discussion about what this is going to be like when the seasons change again. There's looking at past pandemics, there was it started to go down and then came back stronger in the fall. We don't know if that's going to happen here or not. Hopefully not, until there's a vaccine or something in place. This could ebb and flow for some time. We just don't know for fact. This is such a new thing that, but what we hope to do is put a lot of these mitigation measures in place to help keep that curve down, and so that it hopefully doesn't spike. And that's about the best we can do going forward here.
Can I ask a follow-up to that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So Michael, is there a criteria that the county and the health department are using for that spike when they would go backwards and go back to what we have in place right now? I know a couple days could show a spike from previous tests, but after that, is there like a set standard of, well, we need to go back?
I don't know what the time frame would be involved in that. I can say that a lot of the criteria for the reopening was that 14-day period. So I don't know if it would be a 14-day negative trend that then we'd have to revert, or the demand to revert would be like that. It may be less than that. It may be the amount of cases if they suddenly spike up so much that causes concern. That would be decisions that the health will take into account as they go forward and make recommendations to the county executive on.
Thank you.
How does increased testing color that? Are you basing these decisions on hospitalizations or just people who have been tested and it says they got the virus?
Yeah, testing is going to be a big part of it as well. Obviously, the availability of testing will dictate a lot of things, because the cases may go up suddenly as more tests become available. That's just indicative of the available testing that's there. So that should also be taken into account. I think it's important that there's a lot of things that health will look at. Testing is definitely one of them. Hospital capacity, if suddenly hospitals start filling up again and our health system starts to be overwhelmed or anything like that, that would be a major consideration as well. In addition to what that rate of confirmed cases is over a period of time. It's a lot of things that have to be looked at. And again, some of that changes from day to day as more information becomes available or more testing becomes available or whatever.
All right, one other, couple more questions here, and we'll just make these the last two questions. And if anybody has any other questions that you'd like, you could direct them to Mike. I'm sure he's willing to take them through email, or Molly. She'll be happy to help with that as well as myself. I'll be happy to help get any answers. So there's a number of organizations that do large runs in St. Charles. We got a question from somebody wanting to know, they got to run in the fall. They're trying to figure out how to plan at this point. Do you have any suggestions maybe on that? I know right now the main criteria is maintaining the 6-foot distance. Do you think that'll continue through the fall? Does anybody have any idea how long that might continue?
I don't know the answer to that, honestly. You would hope that as the rate of confirmed cases continues to fall through that period of time, that the social distancing will become less and less of a necessity. But until we know what that rate is, we have some history to look at and have a clearer picture. I think it's going to be possibly the new norm for several months, at least through the summer, and whether it continues into the fall will be based on what new information becomes available. I think it's going to be difficult to do a lot of things like that, unfortunately, but if there's a way to logistically put something together like that, and they can show it can be done safely, then that would still be allowed to happen potentially.
And then last question for you. Question about neighborhood pools. How will they be treated? I know I've heard that one before too. I assume, again, it's a 6-foot distancing. I didn't know, is there anything to deal with the water? Do they have to treat their water maybe differently or anything? Do we know?
Yeah, I haven't seen any specific standards being put out by that. I think the social distance separation makes it a little difficult because you can't cordon off 6-foot squares in the pool, and people have to stay within it or anything like that. I think it makes it a little difficult. Be interesting to watch if somebody could try to do something like that. But I think it's going to be difficult to have that kind of opportunities unless they come out with some specific standard that just limits the number of people and just keeps it at that. But I have not seen anything specific to that. I know our guidelines I don't think we speak to that as well. And that probably will come down to, as more and more people want to engage in that activity, some guidance coming out for it. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Dimitri mentioned that they would be able to open, but that they'll have to adhere to strict sanitary guidelines. Yeah, I don't know if you heard that, but the Demetrius at the health department had mentioned in previous presentation that they would be allowed to open, but they would have to adhere to very strict sanitation guidelines and criteria. So that may be some additional information.
Perfect. Well, Mike, thank you very much for all the information. I know it's been very helpful for me to be able to tell people and for the other people on the call. So thank you very much. Next, typically what we have done for our public policy committee meetings is open it up to some of our elected officials, for the different school districts, things like that. So if anybody wants to stick around and listen to those, they're certainly welcome to. So I know Krista Montgomery is here. She's with Congressman Blaine Luetkemeier's office. So Krista, do you have anything to share maybe from the federal level?
Sure, just a couple of numbers regarding PPP loans that have gone out through the last 2 phases for funding. The most recent package that was approved and is currently going out is going to fund help to support an additional 700,000 jobs. across the nation. And as of close of business on Wednesday, those monies, 960,000 loans were approved through 5,300 through over 5,300 lenders for totaling. This was again Wednesday night, so I'm sure it's broke the $90 billion threshold and is still going up. And then the coronavirus relief fund, it's always interesting to see what the breakdown of counties, and St. Charles County received over $47 million through the CARES Act. So that was really good for the county. And so I just wanted to make sure people were aware of some of those numbers. And then in the first phase, I don't know if I had given the statistic. So the PPP loans helped 700,000 jobs. The second phase, the first phase was 770,000. So it's definitely, hopefully it's doing good and helping to offset the difficulties that individuals are experiencing. And then I did put in the side chat too, we did speak on our call this morning about those kind of refusing to want to go back to work due to unemployment, specifically the additional $600 that the Treasury had set aside for individuals that did qualify for unemployment. And you'll have to go to the Department of Labor website, and so labor.mo.gov, and report those employees, letting them know that you have offered them back their job. We have heard some pushback though that is kind of been detrimental to the employee-employer relationship. So just as long as you're giving them a heads up that that's what you'll be doing eventually if they choose not to, because of course we don't want them to take advantage of that program. So that is it for me.
Very good. I appreciate it, Krista. I know State Representative Christy Summer was on earlier. Is she still on? Christy, do you have anything to share from maybe the state level?
So yeah, I'm still here. On the state level, obviously we passed the House's version of the budget. It passed through the House and went over to the Senate this week. I did post something about that on my Facebook page, so there's a lot more detail over there than I want to, have. Anyway, you don't want to hear it right now. $700 million. In savings that we've had to do, but we did fund elementary and secondary education at the same level we did at 2020. So we tried not to make any, cuts per se there. But I know higher education got hit and a lot of the other departments got hit. Either they just didn't get their increase that they were hoping for 2021, or some of them even had to take some decreases. So if you're interested in the more details of what we passed over to the Senate, go over to my Facebook page. I just literally posted it, I think, while we were all here on Zoom. So besides that, obviously we're still in session for at least 2 more weeks. I know this is something you guys are probably interested in, is the internet sales tax. We've actually have discussed that, but don't see anything logically happening in the next 2 weeks. Just because of the process it still has to go through. There's never been enough consensus, can't ever have complete, but enough consensus to just even get something over to the Senate, or even the Senate getting something back to us. I am guessing that the governor may have us come back to do a special on that. That's just my guess. And I know that we've had a couple other ideas, or at least they came to me this past week. So, I would love to try to still push something through in the last 2 weeks. But, honestly, we've got 2 weeks. The Senate is going to be tied up with budget next week. So they're not going to really be discussing anything as far as outside of that. That's going to be their focus. And then you just got 1 week left in our regular session. So personally, I think there may be some things that the governor may have us come back, just because we did lose a month and a half, of really debate in that. Now, we are still meeting in committees. My Ways and Means, we did pass a bill 2 days ago, sorry. And then it is now over in the Senate, and it kind of it was the only Senate bill I had in my possession at the time. So we kind of put some things on there that need to be addressed before the end of the year. But like I said, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And I have a feeling my dog's going to bark. So.
All right, very good. I appreciate it, Chrissy. Thank you. Is there anybody else from state or federal level government on the call? I'm not sure if there is or not. If not, I'll move on to Molly. Did you have anything to add, Molly? Something from what Mike?
Oh, do you want to?
Hold on.
We're sitting
Sorry.
6 feet apart.
Yeah, turn the speakers on.
That should do it. Okay.
Yeah. Nope. How about we come back to you?
Okay.
I know there's a couple of school districts on. Well, we got a couple of school districts on the call. I know there's questions regarding graduations and start of school. Laura or Dr. DeBray or anyone from Francis Howell or Fort Zumwalt, is there anything you guys can share with regards to those?
As soon as I get myself unmuted, yeah. You know, it's been a pretty wild time for school districts in the state, but certainly in St. Charles County. We do have a online instruction going on right now with our kids, and it's going pretty well. We're trying to be as, you know, as liberal as we can so that we're not really demanding a lot. Our parents are kind of getting worn out with this. The kids are a little more used to it than they are, but it's going as well as can be expected. So we're good with that. We are ramping up, bringing our staff back, our support staff and our administrators after May 11th, now that it's been relaxed in Missouri. So we'll gradually bring them back. Our teachers have been and will continue working from home until the end of the school year on May 21st and 22nd. You know, I'm not a real fan of working from home, but I've kind of been won over. Our staff has really done a wonderful job in doing their jobs and communicating with students. So I've been really pleased with that. School year ends on the 21st and 22nd. There will not be any summer camps, practices, any sporting activities, anything for the month of June because of the social distancing requirement. And we'll take another look as we get through June if it can be relaxed a little bit more for the remainder of the summer. All of us superintendents meet with Demetrius Chapman from the health department on a regular basis, about once a week now. And he's been great in terms of giving us all the information that Mike talked about today in terms of how flat the curve is compared to some of our neighbors. So he's a little more optimistic about things as far as getting through the summer and opening up school for the fall. I think all of us right now are scheduled to open August 24th. That's a date set by the state. I don't know that that'll change, but we need to get back in school because we're missing time with these kids. And although our online program, I think, will do a pretty good job keeping them up, it's certainly not like the face-to-face connections with our teachers. So we're excited to get back to school as quick as we can and to see what we have to face in the fall. What issues are we going to have with social distancing? What issues are we going to have with protective gear? And how quickly can we get back to a normal school year? So that's pretty much what's going on in Zumwalt. Like I said, we're looking forward to getting back to it. And I think probably for the first time in history, the kids are going to be looking forward to getting back to school as well.
Yeah, probably. Very good. And did you touch on graduation? Is there any plans for graduation?
Yeah, graduations were originally set for the 22nd and 23rd of May. We have postponed those graduations till the 31st of July for Hope High and the 1st and 2nd for our 4 high schools. That'll give us the best chance, by doing it late in the summer, the best chance for a good sized audience for the kids. We came up with all kinds of ideas for alternative graduations. Kids didn't want any part of it. They want to have as close to a traditional graduation as they can get. So that's
it's a pretty big deal, I think, for obviously a lot of kids. Something we've all experienced, and it's kind of a rite of passage, and everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a pretty big deal. So it's heartbreaking the thought of them not being able to go through that celebration. So anyway, all right. Well, thank you, Dr. DeBray. Is there anybody from Francis Howell on here real quick before I move back to Molly?
Scott, I'm on here for Francis Howell.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. All right.
And hi, I'm Nathan Hoven. I'll be starting as superintendent on July 1st. So I'm kind of working dual jobs right now. I would really echo most of what Bernie said. Most of our details are very similar. The superintendents from the county have been working very collaboratively, trying to be very consistent with our messaging. So I really, in general, don't have a lot different to offer. In Francis Howell, our graduations, we're looking at July 11th is what we've got set aside at the Family Arena. As we get closer, we'll see what we can do in terms of crowd size and capacity and all of that. Otherwise, as he mentioned, our work is starting to shift from what does the end of this year look like to what is next year looking like. So we're working on forming different committees to kind of cover the different aspects of logistics for next year. Really waiting to see what the next few weeks shake out with these lifted restrictions and how that impacts us before we can finalize some of that. But that's really our next big set of work.
Thank you, Nathan. And I don't know if anyone passed along to you, but this committee did take a look at Proposition S, which I know is coming up probably in the June election, and the Chamber Board did vote to endorse Proposition S. So we are supportive of that proposition. It's a no tax increase initiative to do some capital improvements within the Francis Howell School District, as well as build a new North High School, which is much needed. So if there's anything we can do to help you guys out, we're happy to help get the word out and support that initiative. All right, very good. Back to Molly.
We sure appreciate it.
Oh, sorry.
So I just wanted to give a quick census update. So the state of Missouri right now has a self-response rate of 55.7%. St. Charles County is leading the state in self-response rate at 72.1%, which is really great. In 2010, our overall self-response rate was 77%. So we're actually, I think we're definitely on track to get higher than that. And of course, 100% is our goal. If you look at the hard to count map, I've been trying to post it on Facebook. Our biggest area that is not responding or has a lower response rate is the northern St. Charles area. So it's West Alton, Portage de Sioux, Firma. So if anyone has any connections in any of those areas that you can give me or that you can personally reach out to and just remind them, hey, fill out your census, that would be great. We have a complete count commission and we are all happy to reach out, but I could use some contacts. Again, really are shooting for 100% participation. So, please, everybody remind your neighbors. And if you haven't done it yourself, please go ahead and fill it out. It takes only a few minutes. It's really fast and easy.
And if you don't fill it out, somebody will come knocking on your door to get your information. So you might as well go ahead and fill it out and avoid having that contact with somebody.
That's right. And that has been delayed a little bit just due to the pandemic, obviously. So I think the entire timeline of the census has been pushed back just like 2 or 3 weeks. So that'll just kind of go more into the summer.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for the update, Molly. I know we also give some municipal updates from our cities. I saw Julie Powers on the line from City of St. Peters. Julie, do you have anything you want to share with what's going on in St. Peters? You may be muted, or maybe you're not going to give an update. You still there? She may have left. Is there anybody from the City of St. Charles? All right. Anybody else have any who's part of?
Hey Scott, can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go. I hear you now. Perfect. So yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Sorry, I have to use my iPhone for the sound. I'm seeing you guys on my screen, but anyway, sorry about that.
All right. No worries. No worries. I'm glad you're able to catch us.
Yes, it's been great. It's very interesting, but all is well here. We are at City Hall. We've actually been busy getting ready for a planning and zoning meeting we're going to conduct in person on Wednesday with a lot of effort to social distance. So I'll let you know how that goes after the fact. And development-wise, we're still having obviously not quite the level of interest, but still some. So that's good. Some interest in 370 and some senior housing projects. The city has announced that we won't be having Celebrate St. Peter's this year, and we won't be opening our pools. So we're sad about that, but just seemed like the prudent way to go. The board made that decision, or the mayor made that decision, and announced it at the last board meeting. So other than that, I think we're kind of, figuring it out as we go along. I think that's kind of like everybody else. City Hall's still closed. Don't know when that will change, but we're working around that with deliveries and all that good stuff.
Okay. Perfect. Well, we appreciate it, Julie. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure, no problem.
And,
thank you.
City of St. Charles, last chance. Nobody. All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you guys for coming out. The chamber will continue to operate probably for the next few weeks, probably remotely. We'll try to get into the office every once in a while. We are currently looking at contingencies. We have changed our golf tournament date to September the 29th. So it was scheduled for mid-June. So we have pushed that off a few months. We're also looking at contingencies for our Sip and Savor event, as well as, which is in early September, as well as the Santa Run. And we'll keep you posted on when we're able to meet in person for our various committee meetings and our lunch with leaders. So anyway, well, thank you guys for joining us today, and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.